have an unidentified flying object.
And we've been speaking to Alejandro Rojas. Mr. Rojas was just about to comment on it, but we got cut off. So, Johnny, briefly go ahead and say what you said, and then we'll pick up where we left off.
And I just wondered, in your experience and traveling and speaking to different people and your experiences over the years, how do you feel about it? Do you feel there's an end game, a road to the light from it in some way? How do you feel?
I don't know that there is. I think there is an end game, but I don't know. Again, I guess I kind of feel that the end game might be more kind of organized or controlled by whatever third party is out there, whatever is going on out there. I kind of have this idea that really if there are many older civilizations out there, that this isn't their first rodeo. Maybe there are several planets out there with civilizations that are on the cusp of being able to join the galactic neighborhood for a better, and there may be these set protocols on how you bring across a culture, or how you observe a culture to see if they're even ever ready or able to go there. Maybe we will not make it. Maybe we will self-implode. These are pretty dangerous times, and it almost seems like maybe they're going to get a little worse before they get better with, kind of this resurgence of a Cold War and everything. So we'll see what happens. But I kind of feel like they're pulling the strings more than the illusion that humans are. I think, when it comes to as far as whatever the government may know or whatever military organization may know, it's difficult. I know John Alexander was, in Army intelligence. He felt that he did a thorough examination of other intelligence agencies and didn't find anything, but that doesn't mean he was privy to everything. It seems like presidents aren't. Presidents are, they're politicians. So they're in and out very quickly. They serve short terms. Obama, for instance, has spent more of his life in school than in politics, I think, and so or as lawyers or outside of the government. So they have a short period inside. I think I love one of the quotes that President Clinton made, and I think this is the most enlightening and perhaps pertinent to what we're talking about with banging our heads on Washington, the White House's door, and whether or not that is the right place to be. President Clinton seemed to want to look into UFOs. He says he did. He's admitted it several times. And in Hong Kong in particular, and he's always said something similar when he talks about UFOs. He said he's looked into UFOs, he looked into Roswell, he couldn't find anything. But the quote he used in Hong Kong was, "But I wouldn't be the first president that career bureaucrats have lied to." So, these career guys who are in there their entire life, their entire career, for years on end, are obviously going to be more savvy on how the structure works, how everything works, and they'll understand from administrative, and, some of them having worked with several administrations, they'll know how to hide information or to keep things on the side or to keep things away from the politicians. So what those people really don't have any need to share any knowledge. So I don't know that they ever will or that they have an end game when it comes to this topic. Perhaps eventually, as we get to that kind of critical mass like we were talking about, where the public is really into it and is really, in mass asking for something to happen in this arena, maybe they have an idea for what to do then, but they probably have some games that they know how to play that will just sway our attention again, because we were almost at that point, really, in the 50s when the Air Force was looking into this, and then, there were several things that they were able to do to sway the public's attention and to kind of change the conversation into kind of the giggle factor or the silliness that we have today.
I'm glad you brought that up about the politicians only serving a short time, because that would make perfect sense why they're not in the loop. To me, obviously, I think that Eisenhower and obviously Nixon knew, by being Eisenhower's vice president, he was in the loop, but obviously he was cut out of the loop near the end, because he gave us that big warning on the military-industrial complex, when him, as a military president and the supreme Allied commander for World War II, obviously created the military-industrial complex. So I think something happened behind closed doors where he got cut out of the loop. The only president other than those two that I personally believe would know something would be Bush Sr. And the reason is because he was one of these career bureaucrats, in the sense that he was in the CIA and then ultimately served as director of CIA. And so other than that, I think you hit the nail on the head, in the sense that they don't know. And you, like you also said, Clinton, both he made that comment that he wouldn't be the first one that's lied to, and also he really wanted to find stuff on it. He repeatedly made comments such as, hey, the Air Force knows anything about Roswell, and some kid, he was reading a kid's question. He goes, and I want to know too.
Right.
And of course, then he went back on Jimmy Kimmel last year and almost reiterated the same thing, that he wants to know something too. And then there's that famous photograph of Hillary Clinton walking with Lawrence Rockefeller, and she's holding a UFO book. So their interests were there. Whether they had access, I don't think so. So you're right. Are we knocking on the right door is the big question to ask. Now, is there anything, do you think, in your mind that we can do to get the third party to actually do something? Because I don't think so. I think just, they're observing. I don't know if there's this, some people such as Greer tell us that there's this intergalactic rule that says you can't involve yourself in planets' evolutions, and therefore they can't intervene. I don't know what the reason is. Maybe they're acclimating us to get used to them, and this is why you said earlier that they're having more and more sightings versus 50 years ago, 70 years ago. I really don't know. What's your thoughts on that, and what's your thoughts on how we can ultimately get there? Again, like you said, we need the third parties to step forward, but aside from that, do we really have any options?
It's funny, Ed, because it's almost like the answer to that question for me is it's very terrestrial, meaning that all we can do is try to be good citizens and try to take care of or take responsibility for our stewardship for this planet, that kind of crap. But which is true. I mean, it's kind of all we can do. But I think we can also. I think it's a cool time for people like us, because I think it's important for someone to keep an eye on this and to see what's going on and to pay attention, because the little subtle moves that are made, then we're able to report on those and to chronicle that. And I think that's important, and thus we're playing a role. But the idea behind like the Prime Directive and things like that, it's kind of like it's broken, because if their role was to completely be invisible to us, where we wouldn't be able to identify them or know of them, even when you talk about Greer, it's kind of a dichotomy there. Okay, well, they're not supposed to show themselves to us, but they've shown themselves to you, and you're going out and telling everybody about it, which you're saying isn't, which is counter to their wishes. So just by us being able to observe them as infrequent as we do has changed. It's created this whole culture around UFOs that we're a part of. So there's also this theory in social science that the scientists cannot observe. You can't observe without affecting what you're observing. And in social science, this has happened all of the time, just by interacting with, let's say, another culture. When a Western scientist goes out and do that, they're affecting that culture. they're not necessarily then getting their natural kind of interactions that they would have without that. And so you're not able to observe anything without having an effect on it. And if we are being observed, that observation has had an effect on us. Perhaps, the 50s was the time where that observation could be ramped up, and that's why we're having more of an interaction. These are all possibilities in that and we are moving along. But I don't think it's purely a hands-off thing, because if that were the case, then I think we would have no inkling whatsoever of any presence.
I agree with you there. We actually have a question from a listener. I'm going to read it to you word for word. It says here, Mr. Gene Ederman, now 49 of France, claims to have received a message from aliens in 2003, which has now become known as the message, in which the ETs tell us, do you wish us to show up? And they tell us to vote telepathically back to them. What do you make of this?
I almost use a term that I shouldn't have, because I don't want to be, dismissive, and I don't like to be dismissive of people who feel that they're interacting. But I just don't see the point of that thing. It's been around for 11 years. There's only a limited number of people who have seen this message. Most of the people who have seen it are people that are interested in this sort of thing, like us in this field. And I'm sure, because every time you see some mention of it, everybody who's read it says, yes, yeah, come on, what are you waiting for? So I don't understand the purpose. It's almost like that letter that if that's a method that is being used, it's a completely ineffective method, and it's a ridiculous kind of method. Whereas if there's some sort of telepathic abilities, why wouldn't they just kind of pop in everybody's head and say, do you want us to come, yes or no? That would be a true vote of all of humanity. Instead, it's this weird letter that's got to kind of somehow propagate amongst the whole world, and people have to make some sort of opinion based off of this. I don't think it's a very good method if it is something that is legitimately being used. But who knows?
You hit a really good point. Wouldn't they just, if they have that ability, wouldn't they just go into everybody's mind and say, do you want us here or not? I mean, that makes perfect sense. That's a very good question to answer.
They could even be very subtle about it and make it look like it was our own idea, because we all get thoughts in our heads about questions about something or this. I mean, if we all of a sudden had this idea, I wonder if I was asked if they should come, what I would say. I think I would say yes, or I think I would say no. Yeah, then you would have your answer.
Agreed. Now, I know we're going to end up hitting break in less than 10 minutes, but I figured since the Congress is coming up and there's such massive appeal, and it's really the premier event across the nation. I know there's others that claim to have a bigger event, but honestly, the experience that I have at the UFO Congress, the International UFO Congress every year, does not compare, not to downclaim any other events, but it doesn't compare to the Conscious Life Expo or Contact in the Desert. It's truly a much more family-style event in the sense that you're not hearing one person in one room and another person in another room. Everybody's hearing the same lecture. Everybody's on the same page. And this coming year, this coming event, you have Bob Lazar. We were talking about this on break, and obviously we mentioned him in the last 30 minutes, the first quarter of the show. But Bob Lazar, speaking at this event, when for over a decade he's been silent. This is going to be a remarkable thing. Tell us, what did you do to get him there? A, and B, let's talk about some of the other guests there.
Yeah. Well, really, the credit all goes to George Knapp. He, along with, someone we talked about who will be speaking at our conference as well, Jeremy Corbell, had interviewed Bob Lazar for the anniversary of his coming out about Area 51. And, when we watched the video, of course, we've wanted him to speak for a while, but the idea was he's obviously, even though for years, because we've tried to communicate with him, and we have a little bit over the past few years. Every communications we had, I think we wrote a story about it because people are so interested in him. But that he seemed to have things he wanted to say. So, we talked to George. I talked to George quite a bit. And I said, it seems like he does have things to say. We're the biggest conference. This would be his chance to kind of get to the most people and just kind of say his piece. And we will do it in a way that will, he can have all the discretion he wants. In other words, if he just wants to kind of slip in the back door, get on stage and slip out, we'll be able to facilitate that, whatever he wants. And I think there's a big trust issue because he is untrusting of people in this field for probably obvious reasons. There's a lot of people who argue in this field, and of course there's all the online trollers who just say awful things about everybody, which has all made him hesitant. I think you mentioned that before. So that, and then, he has a good relationship with George, and we have a good relationship with George. So George, told him of all the people, this is someone I trust. These guys they're a class act, and they'll treat you properly. So it was, George kind of negotiating this and telling them that, reassuring him that, he can trust us, and that's what did it. So we were really excited about it. It's been a lot of, Bob has been very hesitant, and but I think he's going to have a wonderful experience because as I've tried to tell him, and is that, for all those negative people, when you walk in that room, you're going to be like a hero to those people in the room. And for most people, they're going to feel like that, he's a champion for this cause. And I think he's going to have a very positive reception. Even when we have someone that people kind of don't like there's a lot of people who have some very strong feelings about John Alexander, and they feel he's evil and, he's a disinformationist and things like this. And they'll come out and they'll complain to us about that, but they don't go accost him and yell at him. And he has his own crowd of adoring fans who circle him and ask him questions. So the person who might have the most the emotional people who are frustrated with him and doesn't have a bad experience. He has a wonderful experience every time he comes and talks. So I think that Bob Lazar is going to have a great time and be able to get some stuff off his chest and tell the UFO community some things. And I think that'll be great. And George Knapp is going to do a talk about Area 51. And even the most hardened skeptic, I think, will take another look at his case, because I've seen him do some of this talk at MUFON. He didn't have as much time as he'll have with us, and he's going to modify it a bit. But he talked about Bob Lazar at the MUFON Symposium, and it's just really compelling stuff. He doesn't shy away from the controversial aspects. He tackles those things head on because George is a great journalist. I have the utmost respect for George Knapp. He's an excellent journalist. He understands all these things we've been talking about with politics and the mainstream and science. And so he wants to, it's a daily struggle for a journalist or a mainstream person to remain legitimate and credible. And he's good at that. So he understands that, some of these issues have to be discussed, and he's willing to do so. And, talk to him. He's got a true desire to have the audience get their questions answered, and to have them have the opportunity to get some of their questions answered. He's very attuned to making sure the audience gets what they're looking for. So Yeah, it's going to be very exciting. It's all George Knapp who got this done, and I love the guy. I'm so excited he's going to be there, and that's going to be a wonderful Saturday. And Jeremy Corbell will be talking before George Knapp. Nobody knows who Jeremy is except for you and I and some of the other people.
Yes.
But he's done some amazing work. He's going to release.
Jeremy was on this show about a month ago. Speaking about what he'll be speaking about. So he got a little introduction. That was his first shot of radio. And then, of course, when we had John Lear on, he came on with him. So that was so ultimately the listeners here got a chance to get a peek of what he's going to be speaking about, and also the movies. I think those are going to be stellar.
Mm-hmm.
The movies he's going to be showing on the movie night. One thing I want to say about, two things I want to say. You took the words right out of my mind about George Knapp. He is an excellent journalist, and he definitely looks at things both sides because of his nature. And then, of course, you have, like we said,
George. Sorry, we've also, let's not forget Class TV as well, where George worked and who originally aired all this stuff about Bob Lazar. It's nice that a mainstream can open up and put stuff out there. I know that they always try to ridicule it afterwards with a cheesy line, but at least that they've taken it and brought it to where we are today.
Exactly.
That's a really good point.
Yes.
And a lot of people in all of these stories about the CIA and Area 51 neglect to give KLAS credit. They're the ones who have been investigating Area 51 since the early 80s. They're the ones who have really gotten the word out about Area 51.
And this brings us to our mid-hour break. When we come back, we're going to speak more about the Congress, more of the guests there, the speakers, as well as what Alejandro's going to be speaking about, and so much more. Everybody stay tuned for Hour 2. We've been speaking to Mr. Alejandro Rojas, who is more than a ufologist, a true researcher, a host, an event organizer, and so much more. Someone who really goes out there and does the job, not like some of the people we've interviewed in the past. I don't want to name any names. They do all their research from their lazy chair. But for that matter, we've been speaking on some amazing topics, but what we're speaking on now, which we got cut off before the break, was what's coming on the UFO Congress, since Mr. Rojas is an integral part of putting this event together. And I was just reviewing during break. Of course, I already knew many of the guests that are on there because they're regulars on the show. For instance, Richard Dolan, Yvonne Smith, Jaime Maussan, James Gilliland, John Burroughs, just to name a few, Ruben Uriarte, Thomas Reed we spoke to the other night, as well as he'll be joining us again here on the station next month, and so many people, and even some that we haven't spoken to yet, such as Daryl Sims and Clifford Mahudi, and even the person who was involved in the Allagash abductions, Mr. I don't want to pronounce the last name wrong. Is it Weiner, or is it the other way?
No, it's Wiener.
Okay. Well, anyway, that is a truly, truly remarkable case. That was one that really stuck out in my mind. But let's go back to talking about the Congress itself. I just listed off some of the guests. We talked about Saturday, Jeremy Corbell, when he made his radio debut right here a month ago with his co-producer, Ruben Langdon, and they were speaking about what Jeremy's going to be presenting at the Congress, as well as the movies that are going to be airing. Now, that's something that some people don't know. At the Congress, there are several things that go on. First of all, you have 4 straight days of amazing lectures, and then, of course, there's the banquet night and the film festival. And during the film festival, Jeremy Corbell will be debuting at least one film, if not 2. You got to correct me on that part. I know he's debuting Patient 17, which follows Dr. Lear, and specifically since Dr. Roger Lear passed away last year, a good friend of ours, he ended up pursuing the actual Patient 17. Patient 17 refers to the 17th person that Dr. Roger Lear, also known as the alien implant doctor, removed the implant from. And this was the 17th person who seeked him out, showed him x-rays of an anomalous thing. It was a piece of metal initially from an x-ray. Dr. Lear had a set of protocols that would see if it was worthy of removing, such as testing it for magnetic properties, for see if it had any radio waves emitting from it, and so on and so forth. So,
and let's be clear, Dr. J, you were also there witnessing this as well.
Absolutely, that's right. If anybody recalls, let me give a background. Me and Dr. Lear go way back. I've done 2 amazing documentaries with him. They're available for free on YouTube: Alien Human Project Part 1 and Part 2. Since we were such close friends, we were always together, and he invited me to watch the surgery, and I was in the room. First, two things happened. I was in the room before the surgery when they couldn't find the dang thing. It had moved from its original location, and they were struggling, and L.A. Marzulli was there because he used a portion of it for his film, Watchers 8, and Rick Shaw, and, of course, Jeremy was filming it, and then they finally found it, and then, of course, came the actual surgery, and I remember when it was removed, the patient himself saw an actual... you see the relief on his face. Now, I promised I wasn't going to film in the room because I was, just a guest friend, and the people who had put up the money were using this for real purposes. But what I did do is I filmed afterwards a brief interview with Dr. Lear, as well as his scientist at the time, Stephen, I'm blanking on his last name. But point being is, we got a few interviews there, and I got to tell you this now. Mr. Rojas, you were talking about celebrities. Well, celebrities, one of them that I actually interviewed right here on Revolution Radio was Jack Osborne, son of Ozzy Osbourne, and he has a massive interest in abductions, and he was present at the patient 17 thing. Now, he declined to be on camera, so he didn't sign the release form, and in the room where everybody was watching from a monitor, they had to sign a release form to appear in patient 17 as well as Watchers 8, but he had to sit in the corner because he had to be out of camera range. But that just proved to me that, again, when you have a celebrity talking about the subject, people take it more seriously. And same thing with politicians. And this is why I always strive to get one or the other. And again, I'll be saying this later, but another politician who everyone knows is Paul Hellyer, former Defense Minister of Canada. He was one of the most outspoken figures in this topic, and in his golden years at that, 85 years old. You cannot discount his credibility for what he's done in his entire life. So when you have someone like him speak on this subject, or someone like Senator Gravel or Congressman Cook, or celebrities such as Jack Osborne, or as someone you interviewed, Mr.
Dan Aykroyd, even, I remember seeing a documentary where he exposed himself to being, influenced by UFOs, and
with
very
David
famous
Sarita
around the world.
And Mr. Rojas actually interviewed Blink-182 frontman Tom DeLonge, which I thought was a fascinating interview. When we get those people out there, they influence their fans, and I think that does nothing but good for us. But anyhow, let's talk a little bit more about the Congress and what else people can expect, because it isn't just a lecture. It is truly an event, and an event that people look forward to all year long.
Yeah, and I do want to say another thing on Jeremy Corbell. Just one clarification. I did interview Dan Aykroyd, but I didn't get to interview Tom DeLonge. But my colleagues, Jason and Maureen, did for Spacing Out. And they did a great job. It's the most popular Spacing Out episode, and it's really cool. Jason's been able to talk to Tom DeLonge a couple times, stay in contact with him. He's really awesome. But with Jeremy, I think everybody should go look for his Facebook. You can see some of his stuff. I've posted on my Facebook. But he's posted some trailers for some stuff he's worked on, and his style of filming is incredible. I mean, the visuals are great. The way he writes is really cool, and the way he reads it is like kind of in your face, but it's not like obnoxious, but it's at all. It's just really thought provoking, and you really get into his head and see that he's kind of this regular guy with who's looking at this stuff and figuring it out. And I think he's, and because of his, just what a cool guy he is, I think, and his take on it, he's able to get more out of people than others have been able to in this field. So I am so excited for his films. I'm not even sure completely what he's going to be showing. He's always been planning to show the Lear piece, the Patient 17, but he's kind of changed up what he'll be showing here and there. But currently, he's going to be showing a full film, I think an hour-long one and a half-hour-long. I think that's what he's up to. But he'll be showing at least a couple. And these things he's been working on for a long time. So, and he's been, probably talking to you about them for a long time and us about them. So I am just really excited that he's finally going to be showing them. He's just kind of a perfectionist. So he hasn't felt that they've been ready until now. So I'm just really floored about that, because I think he's going to be one of the next biggest things in this field. And that's one thing we always try to do is might be a few people on this list that people haven't heard of before. But we follow this field closely, and we're always looking for who's doing cool stuff right now. And that's what we want to show at the Congress. We don't want to show the same speaker everybody has, because, you can probably name 6 or 7 of the people that are at every single conference. And we want to have those people who are doing great work out there. It does make people take a bit of a leap of faith, because they've got to trust us that we're going to be presenting people who are doing cool stuff. But I think we get a lot of a loyal fan base for the Congress, because we come through every year. People are like, wow, I've never heard of this person, and what he's saying is amazing. You mentioned the Allagash guys. You can tell I'm just excited about a lot of these guys. But the Allagash guys, everybody loves Travis Walton. When we look at, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but when we look at who's searching UFOs and who is coming to our website, they're searching often 2 names. And this is in the top 10, close to as many people as search for UFOs. They're looking for Travis Walton and Bob Lazar. So, of course, we have a great relationship with Travis. We videotape some of his stuff. He's been to the conference a lot. He'll be at this conference. He'll have a vendor table, but he won't be speaking. But the Allagash guys, I think, are just as cool a case as Travis Walton. They even have a few things that are kind of cooler. And one thing that's great about Travis is when you meet him and you hear him talk, you can tell he's a down-to-earth, regular guy. And that's the same thing with these Allagash guys. They are just down-to-earth, regular guys. Could be your neighbor that you love talking to because they're funny and just a cool guy. That's who these guys are. They're like, not these sophisticated liars. You don't have any sense that these people are hiding anything from you. They're just bearing their hearts and sharing their experiences with you. And that's why I'm really excited to have these Allagash guys back. They were at a UFO Congress maybe 10 years ago, and I used to volunteer. I volunteered that year at the UFO Congress and was helping out with the register and stuff, and I got to see them speak. And I just instantly fell in love with these guys. It's hard not to, because they're just cool guys. I talked to them. It was funny because it was before they even spoke that I was like, these guys are really cool. And I started talking to them, and it took me a minute. And I'm like, wait a second, you're the Allagash guys. You're going to be speaking in a couple of days. They're like, yeah. I mean, they're just so, you get that sense just like you do with Travis, that these are just down-to-earth guys. And their experiences are remarkable. They're absolutely incredible.
Agreed. And the Allagash case is a very, very big one at that. I know Johnny had a question. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Go ahead, Johnny.
To concur with what you're saying regarding the people that, that have been experiencers like Travis, how when you actually talk to them, they're really not in it for profit. They're not in it for money or the limelight. They're in it for the true search of what's going on, and to help people, other people that are experiencers and things like that. So, it's amazing, like for myself, who's not an experiencer, but someone who's found it fascinating for many years, and to get the privilege to come on to shows like this and talk directly to the horse's mouth and ask those questions that won't be asked by the media and stuff. I feel very privileged, and as I say, everyone I've spoke to, you get it from their heart, the horse's mouth, but not the horse mouth, but literally from their gut, what they make of it. Because at the end of the day, we all make of it our own understanding, but to be able to bring that to a collective where we all have that same understanding, is a great thing to be able to witness and bear witness to. So, that's really my point I was trying to make towards what you just said there, sir.
I agree with you 100%. And I mean, when I joined MUFON, when I first got into it, I was highly skeptical of the whole alien abduction thing. But then, through MUFON, I started meeting some of these people. It was some of these people who would have sightings. We'd go investigate. And with one of them, for instance, actually it's been with a couple people who claim to have been abductees that I met through MUFON investigations, where I was with them when I had my own sighting. And these are a couple cases, like Travis's, the Allagash ones. There's no way. I just don't feel in any way that these people are being deceptive. And that's what makes me, open to the idea. But I think that's why Travis and I think with these guys too, have such a big effect on people, because I think a lot of people approach it skeptical. But when you sit down and you listen to some of these people, you can't help but walk away and say, wow, I think I had this whole thing wrong. Like there really is something to this.
That was going to be my next sort of question, which was, what brought you into this field of understanding and wanting to be involved with ufology, and was it from personal experience? And you just answered the question, which is that you had a personal experience. Can you tell us, enlighten us a bit more about that?
Well, I've had a few personal experiences, but they weren't until years after I even became a MUFON investigator. What originally, I had been open to all of this, like in high school, and even when I first joined college, it was to be an engineer. I was really into math and science, but at the same time, I was always open to the paranormal, just because, I had a lot of respect for my Native American heritage and my Mexican American heritage, and they're more open to those kind of ideas. And it all kind of just came slamming together, because eventually I became a journalism student, and that was about the time that the Stephen Greer thing came out, his disclosure project, when he went to the press club in Washington. And at the time, I had been curious about, and I had asked people, including journalists, why don't you cover this story? What do you think of it? And they said, this is the biggest story. If I ran across something credible, I'd definitely cover it. And that's why I thought, this is going to be big. This thing's going to really blow up, and it's going to be a serious topic with everyone. And when it didn't with that event, that's when I knew that, wow, something's wrong. People just need the information, because they don't have this information. And most of it, not everything he presented, is not information that were in the run-of-the-mill cookie-cutter documentaries that were out at the time and continue to be put out. I work with a lot of production companies that call us and say, we're going to do a UFO show. What do you think we should cover? And for better or worse, I've spent hours and hours with some of these shows, helping them get in touch with people and advising them on some of the cases they should do. And inevitably, often, they turn out to be a cookie cutter of another show. And they're like, well, we're not going to be like the other shows, because we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And they think they're original, and they're not. And they just end up covering the same old cases that have been covered forever. But there's so much more to this. I mean, a lot of these people that we're having aren't covered in these documentaries. And they've got amazing information that's better than what's in most of those documentaries. So that's what really compelled me to research even harder, and then eventually investigate, and then eventually to do my best to share information with the public. My first sighting wasn't until years later, and it was at the UFO Watchtower. So, and it was the first time. So, in the San Luis Valley, we're having, incidentally, Chris O'Brien speak at our conference about cattle mutilations, and he's the expert of the Mysterious Valley, the San Luis Valley in Colorado, where it has a lot of weird stuff, a lot of the cattle mutilations. In fact, the very first cattle mutilation happened in this area. And Chris O'Brien just recently wrote the best book on cattle mutilation ever, I think. It's an amazing book. I think it's great. And I'm so excited for his talk. I've seen him present on this, and it's really good.
How do you find, that there's quite a big silence? It's almost an ambiguity of silence, that no one talks about human mutilations, which, we have English documentaries here, and they discuss it, that, farmers ring up these groups, and they go out and look at mutilated cattle in England. So these things are still continuing to happen. And also the same people have investigated Ministry of Defence people that have come out and whistleblowed and said, look, there's human mutilation going on at the same time. And there's a very famous Brazilian photographs that show a human mutilation, again, rectum removed and everything like that you would expect from a cattle mutilation, but on humans. And so there's a taboo to talk about it. You can ask key people that, like you say, talk about cattle mutilation, but they go very quiet when they're asked about human mutilation. And so I'm a bit concerned that that's not public domain enough. What's your opinion on that?
Well, with cattle mutilations are fairly abundant. They've happened, hundreds of thousands of cattle mutilations. So it's much more accessible. It's much more investigation has been done there. Alleged human mutilations are far fewer and in between, and it's not like you can just go investigate that as a civilian. So the details are really hard. I haven't found a good case with a lot of great information that shows it's credible. The case in Brazil is a lot of the people I respect who are researchers in Brazil say that they don't believe that to be an actual human mutilation, something that was mysterious. And so
they make a claim that it was Agent Orange that was used, and that these effects caused the same sort of like effects of mutilation.
Well, Agent Orange was used for a defoliation, so it's kind of to kill plants and stuff. So I don't know what. But regardless, this is one case that is really hard to get to get good information on. So there's just a lack of cases that have great information you can follow up on. I think that's the hard part.
We've been speaking to Mr. Alejandro Rojas, and I wanted to give you, Mr. Rojas, an opportunity right now to tell all the listeners where they can find you, what's next for you, and, of course, about your radio show.
OpenMinds.tv is where you can find all of our stuff. There we have, luckily our YouTube channel hasn't been shut down, so we do a weekly, or right now, bi-weekly, because we're too busy working on the conference to do it weekly, but it's normally weekly, web series called Spacing Out, where we go over the UFO news of the week. And then, of course, like you said, we have the podcast that we do on a weekly basis. So we do that typically every Monday because of the holidays and the conference. We've been a little less, actually up until this week, we've been pretty regular, even through the holidays. But now we're kind of getting so busy with our conference that it's we're not as regular for the next month. And, of course, that conference, the UFO Congress, which we're really happy because this year the Guinness World Records made us officially the largest UFO conference in the world, according to them. So that's pretty cool. But that's what we've been working on. It's all at openminds.tv. You can find links to the Congress there and everything else we do. And if you want to go directly there, the conference is just ufocongress.com.
And again, as I said earlier, it is truly a remarkable event. Anybody out there listening, I highly recommend you take that trip. You got over a month to plan your stay. There are several hotels. They may not be directly right there. Some of them are sold out, but I found one within a few miles away, and I booked it fairly late. So they are out there, and this is definitely not an event to be missed. Every year is not to be missed, but specifically this year because You have someone who is really coming out of the woodwork, as well as we said, Jeremy Corbell, who's first time presenting, and you will see his truly meticulous films. I think, Mr. Rojas, the other film is Immaculate Deception, because that's what he was talking about with John Lear. So I'm hoping that's what he's going to show, because that crosses over Bob Lazar, John Lear, and, of course, George Knapp. We got a question from a listener, and I'm going to go ahead and read it here. It's saying, speaking of Mexico, going back to what we were saying earlier, huge number of sightings in South American continent over the past several years. Are the sightings increasing, or has it subsided?
You know what? It's really hard to say. I think that they're going on strong. In fact, I just wrote a story today about thousands of people in a town in Argentina who supposedly saw a UFO just this past weekend. And several of them got videos of it. It is just a point of light that is kind of moving through the sky. The videos don't show you a whole lot. They show this point of light. At one point it's blinking on and off, and it's moving slowly. But they claim that it was zigzagging, and people saw it in another town about 20 miles away. So that was a big story that hit the news out there in Argentina just this week. But you're right, there are a lot of sightings out there. It's always hard to say whether or not it's due to an increase in activity or just an increase in coverage by the local media. There's also in Mexico, has always had a lot of sightings being reported, and largely because of Jaime Maussan, who will also be at the UFO Congress, because Jaime Maussan was a very well-known journalist out there, and he started covering UFOs, and now that's all he does for the last decade or so. And he's very popular. In fact, it's kind of fun. When I go to dinner with him out here, even in the United States, the staff, people from Mexico, will come up and want to have pictures taken with him. So it's like you're hanging out with a celebrity when you go to dinner with him, even here in Arizona, or I think I first met him in Colorado when I lived there. So that's kind of cool. But he's really made the topic huge out in Mexico, so you have a lot of people reporting on him there as well. So it's really hard to say. Even in the United States, I just wrote a story this week called Top 10 UFO Hotspots in States. Essentially what I do every year is I'll take the MUFON reporting data and crunch those numbers in Excel using pivot tables and stuff to find out where sightings are. And they had an increase in sightings, about 1,000 more reports this year than last year. Does that mean that there's more UFOs flying around? Or does it mean that more people know about MUFON and they know to report to MUFON? It could be the latter, because MUFON has this new TV show, the Hangar 1 TV show. So it's always hard to say. But one interesting point is, one of the things I do is I'll also match this up against population, because often the places that report the most are usually the ones that have the most people. So I'll match it up how many sightings per person, so we can find out, where is reporting more per person, where maybe this is a true hot spot. And what came to the top this year, which was kind of strange, number one, was Oregon. So I think because you're having more reports per population this year in Oregon, that would be a stronger argument that perhaps there is more activity going on in Oregon in particular this year.
I would have never honestly thought of that. And I'm glad you mentioned some of these cases that are going on in South America, because this leads me to my next question. And I was hoping we could spend the majority of the remainder of time on this. Because you've been a researcher for so long, you worked on some notable cases, one which we spoke off air. I wanted to ask you, in the last, you said you compiled the top 10, and of course you just did with, you compare the populations and all that. What are some of the biggest cases that have stuck out in your mind in 2014? 2014,
one of the biggest cases, and we're going to have him at the Congress too, is John Burroughs, just because he has medical issues. And you might have noticed we're having John Burroughs and his lawyer at the conference, because he believes these medical issues stem from the Rendlesham Forest incident. He was one of the main witnesses there. He was close to the craft. He was actually out there on 2 occasions when the craft was seen by multiple military people. and he got close to it. So, and he has heart problems that he has been told by physicists that other people who have been around radiation might have been known to have these same sort of heart issues he's been dealing with. So he went to the government to get his medical records from the Air Force. They said they didn't have any, and they said the Air Force says you weren't even in the Air Force at that time. He had to go to Senator John McCain to get help. McCain was able to get the Air Force to find out and admit that, okay, he was in the Air Force during that time. But according to him and Pat Fresconia, his lawyer, McCain's office said, but you'll never get your medical records from that period of time. So Pat is trying to help him make sure that the government takes care of him still and gives him his benefits. And Pat says it'll probably happen, and he has represented people who have worked in top secret locations and where they don't release medical record information and stuff like that. He says that's not abnormal. However, that's for people who are known working in top secret classified areas. John Burroughs was not. He was a security officer at a base. So that's what makes it strange. And they're not saying why those records were classified, and Pat and John believe they are classified. Beyond that, John has gone on to do some FOIA requests out there in the UK. He's been doing a lot of work to uncover more information, some of which he'll share for the first time at the Congress. But he got the UK to admit they have more UFO files that they didn't release, even though supposedly last year they had released the last bit, all of their UFO files. They had to go back and say, oops, I guess we found some more due to John Burroughs' work. So that's a really exciting case, and he'll be updating us on that at the Congress. But another case I think is really important that didn't get a lot of play is John Greenwald of the Black Vault. He did some FOIA requests for the NSA because just like this earlier today, we were talking about the Area 51 document, how it was further unredacted, where Area 51 was blacked out in these documents, and it got further unredacted due to requests by people to unredact it, and they did, and then they revealed Area 51. Well, John Greenwald asked them to unredact the NSA UFO files, and this had created a big furor in the 80s when Peter Gersten and the Citizens Against UFO Secrecy had sued the NSA because the NSA said, we're not giving you the UFO files. Well, they sued. The NSA was forced to release these files, hundreds of them, but they whited out everything. And it's funny that they did that because they had blacked out one paper. And Stanton Friedman goes around and he shows his paper and how it's all blacked out and says, if there's no secrets, is this all blacked out? Well, when they released the rest of the files, they whited them out instead of blacking them out so it doesn't look as interesting. But still, all the information is covered up. And they told John Greenwald they lost all of their UFO files.
I don't believe that. And some of these, as you just mentioned, Stan Friedman, when he goes around shows them, they literally have just nothing but the date. That's it. Everything else is blacked out, now whited out. Very sad.
And that's the same with the rest of the files. They're mostly whited out, and there's very little text. So I think this is really important that John Greenwald finally got a response, and they told him the NSA has lost all their UFO files, despite them being a big media deal and a big lawsuit against them previously. They knew that these files were important to people, and they supposedly lost them. I think that's a big story, and I really kudos to John Greenwald for getting them to admit that.
And I don't believe one bit that they would lose them because, you know that the NSA right now is storing every phone call, every email, just about every piece of information on everybody around the world in these massive servers and computers that they have. I think it's in Colorado, but I could be mistaken where they're holding this. So I would think that over the last 10, 20 years, they would have scanned all these files and uploaded them into electronic format. Therefore, so when they say they lost it, I just really find that hard to believe. But what better way for them to dismiss everything by saying, oh, sorry, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, even some of the most hardened skeptics I've told this story to, and even they have to take pause and say, that doesn't sound right at all, because it doesn't. It sounds ridiculous. So, yeah, that's a big one. I wrote a story called Top 10 UFO Videos of 2014, and you can see my top 10 videos there. But at the end, I also put a couple dozen links to really cool stories from 2014, because there were a lot of them. So people can see that there as well.
Well, we got a little over 10 minutes left. You want to talk about some of those?
Yeah, sure. I think maybe my favorite, just so we can get into this one, is this one from the Netherlands. And I call it the Blue UFO because this guy in the Netherlands, I think this was in August, he was filming, and this is by The Hague along the Rhine River. The town is called Maasluis. But he was filming the docks in a boat in the dock, and he noticed something just hanging there. And so he started to film it, and this was covered by local news out there. And you see this blue dish-shaped object, and it's sitting there for a long period of time. Really, really weird video. So that was a really cool one. I like that one. The other videos that I really like are a couple of night vision videos. I think this is one of the coolest things. I think this is important, that a lot of people are using night vision to catch some pretty cool stuff. And two of them that I think were really cool are both similar in that they're a triangular formation of lights that cannot be seen with the naked eye. Now, jets, and we even have had this actually when I've been out with Ben Hansen, a Factor Fake. He's a good friend, and we went out with his night vision because he represents a night vision company. And we got these lights. We couldn't see it with our eyes, but we could see it in the night vision. And it turned out to be jets, because we've got Goldwater out here not too far from Phoenix, and they will fly jets with their visible lights off, but only their infrared lights on, so you have to be careful of that. But both of these videos show a triangular formation that does not appear to be jets or aircraft, and are just really mysterious and strange. One of them was taken by a military guy who's actually a close combat trainer. He's a career military guy, and he happens to be interested in UFOs, so he takes his night vision stuff out at night sometimes and looks for UFOs. And then this time, he's posted videos before, and he's showing it. He keeps in contact with his local MUFON to look at the videos. But this one has really baffled him, and I think it's really cool. And Ben actually got involved in that. He thought it was cool, too, and he showed it to some military friends, because there was another analyst, a friend of ours, Mark, who felt, D'Antonio from MUFON, he felt that it could be a refueling operation, but that'd be pretty dangerous to do that with your lights off and with just your IR in a populated area. So people have argued that that doesn't happen in populated areas. Plus, I don't think it looks similar. In the story, I posted pictures of that, because you can't find some online. And I don't think it looks the same. Ben felt the same, so as other investigators from MUFON, that it was more mysterious than that. And we've had a couple pilots who say, yeah, I don't think that that's the case either. Even people who have done those sort of maneuvers as military pilots.
I agree with you there exactly, because, first of all, unless it's a serious ongoing operation, a military operation, they would not be flying over a populated area with their lights off. If they're going to do such a maneuver to test the ability to refuel under such conditions, clearly they would do it over the desert or somewhere in case something goes wrong. Then, of course, it doesn't have to crash land into homes or anywhere that people can be killed on the ground. So just that fact alone would make no sense of it being the explanation of a craft refueling.
Yeah, and especially with the IR on. But yeah, I agree. So that one's really cool. There's a couple more. There's this one from Pennsylvania where the police saw it too, and it's really cool because a representative from the police station actually talked to the news and said, yeah, we sent our guys out there and they saw something they couldn't explain. So they stuck by the story, and this guy even went on the news to say that, which is rare because it's easy for the cops to just say, "Nah, we didn't think it was weird," and save some face. But they felt compelled to stand by the citizens and say, "Yeah, we think it was weird too." And a really cool one. This is Colorado, where a news organization went out to investigate some lights that people had been seeing during the day, these white objects in the sky in Colorado. And the news actually caught some footage themselves. And the news reporter said, this thing was sitting there for a long time, maybe even an hour or something. I can't remember exact time he gave, but essentially it sat there for a really long time, and then it shot up quickly out of sight. He said, that was not a balloon. I don't know what that was. So the reporter in the video is just obviously very shocked by what he had seen. So that's a really cool one, too.
The police, that's a very major topic. Whenever a policeman speaks about a UFO sighting, okay, let's back this up for a second. For general public to believe anything, you can have an anchorman from for ABC or a major network like that, CBS, talking about something, but it's kind of iffy in some senses. People will take it with a grain of salt, especially if it's related to UFOs. But when you have a government official or a police officer talking about something, the credibility of what's given to what they're talking about skyrockets. So whenever you have UFOs and police involved, you have a really good mix of something that is more solid, because police, the methodology they use to investigate anything in their careers is a very strict standard. So when they actually go forward and say something like that and stick to say, I truly don't know what this is, this acted anomalous, and of course, to back up a claim like that is remarkable. Johnny, you got a question. Go ahead.
Basically, regarding with Mexican sightings and things like this, I've noticed a word that crops up called Ibani, and it was a space-type serpent made up of lots of different orbs that were making almost a singularity in a sense. And this thing was floating and coming down in the sky, and some go up, but I actually saw them myself as a pillar, a single line about 30 foot from the ground, going up about 400 foot in the air. And I noticed all these independent orbs just collectively, in their own intelligence, just go to the bottom of the pillar, and it would slightly rise up. And I watched this Ibani for about 2 or 3 minutes. And it's the only word I know, but it seems to be a Mexican word. Is there a description of that word in English?
Yeah, Ibani is, let me look it up. I can't remember. We've covered this before. I've actually gone out to Mexico and looked at some of their footage. Now, the majority of what they are getting, I am personally convinced, are these wedding arches made out of balloons. They called, and they'll even admit it looks exactly like it's an arch of balloons, but look at how weird that it moves. The majority, but not all of them. Some of them are genuinely really strange.
Yeah, my experience was certainly not balloons. These were real orbs.
Yeah.
And I've
watched stands for a biological entity, anomalous biological entity that's not identified, essentially. Technically, it's Entidad Biological Anomalous No Identificada. That's what IBANI stands for. It started in Mexico, but really, they've been seen all over the world. I've even seen some from Japan where they even called them Ibani, because I think they saw, online the similarities. So there's certainly unexplainable ones and some weird ones, but you have to be really careful with some of those that you see.
And I'm glad you mentioned that it came up in Mexico, because of the fact that I remember seeing a bunch of these videos where some people referred them as to space serpents, and I remember specifically this one looked like a purple tube, and it was very long, and obviously at first glance you could think it's one of those banners or those tube balloons that's flying, but when you really look at it, it's very anomalous, to say the least. I don't know what other word to apply to it, but that's exactly what I would have to say. With all this phenomenon that's really coming and skyrocketing these days, do you think we're hitting a tipping point? I mean, we're down to the last couple of minutes, so I'm not going to take you too much further on what we've seen or what's we've seen. Of course, we could do a whole show on Allagash, an entire show with you on the Smith. Every one of the guests we could do everything on, and we could spend a week alone just talking about the cases you investigated. Again, what's stuck out in your mind, and do you think we're hitting a tipping point because of the fact that more and more people are reporting them, or more and more people are seeing them, or the fact that more and more UFOs are showing up?
I don't know that we're reaching a tipping point quite yet, but I think we're moving towards one. I think that more and more people are paying attention to the field and taking it seriously, including people in the mainstream. I think just a couple of years ago, it was actually during the Stephenville thing, Matt Lauer said, yeah, I believe in UFOs, and Al Roker said, yeah, me too. And, they were like, if we would go check people out, if we knew they were there, so why wouldn't they check us out? And, so you have more and more people, celebrities coming out and feeling more comfortable with even talking about being abducted. So I think we're getting to more and more people are feeling comfortable talking about it. I think we're still a long way from a tipping point, but we're headed in the right direction is what I think. So that's definitely a really good thing.
I totally agree. And with alternative media such as this, your show, Open Minds, everything out there, providing people access to what they normally would have not received from the mainstream networks 30, 40 years ago when it was more controlled. Mr. Rojas, it has truly been an honor to speak with you. I want to definitely have you on again. I know you're really busy with the Congress, so we'll do it again afterwards. And, of course, again, let's plug in those important websites, everybody. Go to openminds.tv, openminds.tv, as well as ufocongress.com. And again, as Mr. Rojas said, you can find a link there to his radio show. And just a final reminder, again, Paul Hellier's on next week, and you can get all these information at Dr. J Radio Live, drjradiolive.com. You can follow me at Twitter at Dr. J Radio Live. This is Rome Radio, Dr. J signing off.